There are people who cry before they can stop themselves. A voice trembles. Eyes fill. The body reacts faster than the mind can explain. In a world that praises control, this reaction is often misunderstood. Labeled as fragility, as weakness, as something to hide. But tears are not accidents. They are messages the nervous system sends when emotion has nowhere else to go. Some people cry not because they feel too little, but because they feel deeply. Because their inner world responds honestly to what touches it. Behind easy tears lies heightened awareness, emotional sensitivity, a nervous system that listens closely. This is not a failure of strength. It is a different relationship with feeling itself. To understand those who cry easily is to question what strength truly means, and why vulnerability has been so deeply misnamed. For some people, tears arrive quietly and without warning, not after a long build-up, not after careful reflection. They appear in conversations, during conflict, while watching a simple scene, or hearing a certain tone of voice. The eyes respond before the mind has time to decide what is happening. This experience is often confusing for the person living it. Inside, there is a calm attempt to stay present, to listen, to remain composed. But the body speaks first. The throat tightens. The chest softens. Emotion moves upward, finding the quickest exit it knows. Crying easily is not always tied to sadness. Sometimes it appears during frustration, relief, empathy, or even gratitude. Tears surface when something matters. When the emotional system recognizes meaning, intensity, or vulnerability, even if the conscious mind has not labeled it yet. Many who cry easily describe a sense of exposure, a feeling of being seen too clearly. The tears feel like a betrayal of control, as if something private has spilled into the open without permission. This can create embarrassment, shame, or the urge to apologize for an emotional response that was never chosen. But beneath this reaction is not instability. It is responsiveness, a nervous system that reacts quickly to emotional shift, a sensitivity to tone, energy, and emotional undercurrents that others may barely register. These tears are not performances. They are not manipulations. They are reflexes, like flinching at sudden light or pulling a hand away from heat. The body is doing what it was designed to do: respond to emotional significance in real time. To recognize this is to soften the judgment around it. Crying easily is not a failure of emotional strength. It is an honest signal that the inner world is awake, attentive, and deeply engaged with what is unfolding. Emotion, here, is not delayed. It arrives exactly when it is felt. Emotional sensitivity rarely appears without a history. It is often shaped quietly, long before a person has language for feelings, long before tears felt like something to explain. In many cases, those who cry easily learned early to pay attention to moods in a room, to changes in tone, to what was said and what was left unsaid. As children, they sensed emotional shifts quickly because doing so mattered. It helped them stay connected. It helped them feel safe. Some grew up in environments where emotions were unpredictable, where love felt conditional, where being emotionally aware meant anticipating needs before they were spoken. Over time, this attunement became automatic. The nervous system adapted by staying alert, responsive, open. Others learned to be the emotional container in their families. The one who listened. The one who felt deeply on behalf of others. When emotional expression was discouraged or ignored, feelings had nowhere to land. Tears became one of the few outlets the body trusted. This kind of conditioning does not create weakness. It creates adaptation. The system learned to respond quickly because it once served a purpose. Emotional expression became a form of regulation, not a loss of control. Attachment patterns also play a quiet role. Those with anxious or highly attuned attachment styles often experience emotions more vividly in relational moments. Connection, distance, disappointment, or misunderstanding can activate old emotional pathways, ones formed early, when closeness felt uncertain. As adults, the original context may be gone, but the emotional reflex remains. The body remembers what the mind no longer questions. Tears emerge not because the present moment is overwhelming, but because the emotional system learned long ago that expressing feeling was safer than holding it in. Understanding this history reframes the response. Crying easily is not a flaw formed in adulthood. It is a language learned early, one the nervous system still speaks fluently. Not all nervous systems experience emotion at the same volume. Some are wired to register emotional information faster, deeper, and more vividly than others. This difference is not a disorder. It is a variation. People who cry easily often have heightened emotional reactivity within the limbic system, the part of the brain responsible for processing emotion, memory, and threat. When emotional stimuli appear, this system activates quickly, sometimes before the prefrontal cortex has time to interpret or regulate the response. The body reacts first. Tears are released before words are formed. This process is closely tied to emotional regulation. Crying is not merely an expression of feeling, it is also a biological release. Emotional tears contain stress hormones like cortisol. When they flow, the nervous system is attempting to restore balance, not lose it. Empathy also plays a role. Mirror neurons, cells that allow one person to emotionally resonate with another, tend to be more active in highly sensitive individuals. This means others' emotions are not just observed, they are felt. A story, a conflict, a subtle shift in tone can trigger the same internal response as a direct personal experience. For some, emotional processing moves through the body rather than staying contained in thought. Instead of intellectualizing feeling, the system somatically discharges it. Tears become the pathway emotion takes to exit. Importantly, this does not indicate emotional immaturity. In fact, research suggests emotionally responsive individuals often have strong emotional awareness. They sense what is happening internally even if they cannot yet articulate it. Crying, in this context, is not a breakdown. It is communication between brain and body. A signal that something meaningful has been registered. The nervous system is not malfunctioning. It is responding exactly as it was designed to, efficiently, honestly, and without delay. Emotion is processed, balance is restored, and the tears pass. For those who cry easily, the deepest struggle is rarely the tears themselves. It is the moment just before them. The quiet internal resistance, the attempt to stay composed while emotion rises without permission. There is often a strong desire to appear stable, capable, unaffected. Society teaches restraint early. that control equals strength, and visible emotion equals exposure. When tears surface too quickly, they can feel like a personal failure, as if the body has revealed something that was meant to remain private. This creates an internal split. One part of the mind watches the emotion unfold, already judging it. The other part is overwhelmed by the feeling it did not choose. The more the emotion is resisted, the more intense it becomes. Suppression tightens the system. The body pushes back. Shame quietly enters here. Not because crying is harmful, but because it is misunderstood. Many who cry easily apologize for it, even when no apology is needed. They feel responsible for others' discomfort, carrying the belief that their emotional response is inconvenient or excessive. This internal conflict keeps the nervous system on edge. The fear of crying can become stronger than the emotion that caused it. Anticipation alone is sometimes enough to trigger tears, not from feeling, but from the pressure to contain it. Control, in these moments, is an illusion. Emotional responses cannot be commanded away. They can only be delayed, redirected, or intensified through resistance. The paradox is quiet but powerful. The more one fights the tears, the less control remains. When emotion is treated as an enemy, the body escalates its signal. Crying easily is not the absence of control. It is the presence of emotion without suppression. The conflict lies not in feeling too much, but in believing that feeling must be hidden to be acceptable. At some point, a quiet realization begins to form. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gently, as understanding replaces self-criticism. The moment comes when crying is no longer seen as a mistake, but as a message, a signal rather than a flaw, something the body does for the person, not to them. This reframing changes the internal landscape. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" a softer question appears. What is this response trying to communicate? The tears are no longer interruptions. They are information. Sensitivity, when observed without judgment, reveals intelligence. It shows an ability to register emotional truth quickly, to sense meaning beneath words, to respond honestly to what is happening inside and around the self. This realization often follows exhaustion, the fatigue of trying to be less reactive, less visible, less affected. Over time, it becomes clear that suppression has never led to peace, only tension. Control has only delayed the inevitable release. When sensitivity is reframed, tears lose their threat. They become part of emotional processing rather than evidence of weakness. The nervous system is allowed to complete its cycle instead of being stopped midway. This does not mean emotion overwhelms everything. In fact, acceptance often brings more stability. When the body is no longer bracing against itself, reactions soften. The fear of crying no longer amplifies the emotion. Understanding replaces resistance. Compassion replaces embarrassment. Crying easily stops being a personal defect and becomes a trait, one with context, purpose, and depth. Something that can exist without apology. The turning point is not about crying less. It is about fearing it less. And in that shift, emotional honesty begins to feel safer. The body relaxes. The tears pass more quietly. Not because they were controlled, but because they were finally allowed to be understood. Healing does not arrive as the absence of tears. It arrives as the absence of fear around them. When emotional sensitivity is accepted rather than resisted, the nervous system begins to soften. There is less bracing, less internal surveillance. The body no longer prepares for embarrassment before emotion has even appeared. Integration means allowing emotion to exist without assigning it a story of failure. Tears are no longer interruptions that need to be managed. They are experiences that pass through, leaving the system quieter than before. With this shift, emotional responses often change naturally. Not because they are controlled, but because they are no longer amplified by shame. When the body feels safe expressing emotion, it does not need to signal as loudly. Self-trust slowly returns. The person learns that feeling deeply does not make them unstable, it makes them honest. Emotion becomes something that can be noticed, named, and allowed without urgency. Integration also brings boundaries. Sensitivity no longer means absorbing everything. As understanding grows, there is a clearer distinction between what belongs to the self and what belongs to others. Empathy remains, but it no longer requires self-erasure. The nervous system learns a new rhythm. Emotion rises. Expression happens. Release follows. Balance returns. Nothing needs to be fixed in the middle. This is not emotional numbing. It is emotional maturity, the ability to let feeling move without panic, to cry without collapse, to feel without self-judgment. In this state, tears lose their power to define identity. They become one response among many, not the center of the story. Healing here is quiet. It does not harden the heart. It steadies it. Emotion is no longer something to escape. It becomes something that can be carried, gently, honestly, and without fear. Tears carry knowledge the mind cannot always reach. They know the weight of a long-held feeling, the presence of unspoken connection, the quiet acknowledgement of beauty or loss. They trace the contours of the heart, mapping experiences that words often fail to describe. For those who cry easily, tears are not accident. They are the body's way of speaking a language older than logic. Each drop tells a story of perception, of resonance, of sensitivity to the subtle currents of life. They are reminders that feeling is alive, that the interior world is awake and aware. In tears there is honesty. No pretense can survive their clarity. They arrive at the boundary between inner and outer life, bridging thought and sensation. They communicate not just sadness, but empathy, relief, gratitude, and awe. They are signals that the self has registered something profound, and that it matters. Tears also contain wisdom about rhythm. They teach that emotion cannot always be controlled, only witnessed. That vulnerability is not weakness, but intelligence. That strength is not absence of feeling, but the capacity to experience it fully. To watch someone cry is to see the body in conversation with the soul. To cry easily is to live in that conversation often, to inhabit a mind and body that respond with immediacy, sensitivity, and depth. In understanding tears this way, the narrative of weakness fades. It is replaced with quiet reverence for the human system, for the delicate architecture of nerves and heart, for the honesty that sometimes overwhelms, for the courage inherent in exposure. Those who cry easily know what it is to feel deeply. They know what it is to witness the world's subtle truths. And in their tears, the world itself finds reflection. Emotion is not a flaw. It is presence. And in presence there is profound intelligence.